The morning sky over New York City turned dark as massive ships appeared without warning. Lisa Martinez was drinking coffee in her office when every screen in the building started showing the same message. Giant alien vessels hung over every major city on Earth like storm clouds that would never move. People ran through the streets. Cars crashed into each other. The president went on television, but nobody could hear him over the panic. Lisa stood at her window watching the chaos below. She had seen riots before and natural disasters and terrorist attacks. This felt different. This felt like the end of everything. Then the ship started talking. The voice came from every radio and television and phone on the planet at the same time. It spoke perfect English, but sounded like a computer trying to be polite. Greetings to the species of the third planet. We are the Zephyrian Collective. We bring you legal notice under the Cosmic Arbitration Protocols. Lisa stopped breathing. Legal notice. Not invasion, not surrender demands. Legal notice. Your species has been selected for evaluation. You have 30 standard galactic days to appear before the Cosmic Court. You must prove your right to exist as an independent civilization. Failure to appear will result in automatic judgment against your species. Failure to prove civilizational merit will result in absorption into the collective as a servant species. The voice continued in the same calm tone. This process has been completed successfully on 412 worlds. No species has ever successfully defended their independence. A representative will arrive at your primary governmental facility in 6 hours to explain the procedures. Do not attempt to resist or flee. The Cosmic Court sees all. Then the voice stopped, and the world went quiet. Lisa grabbed her phone and called the White House. The line was busy. She called the Attorney General's office. Busy, she called her assistant. Get me through to Washington right now. Use every contact we have. 2 hours later, she was on a military plane to Washington. By the time she landed, the alien representative had already arrived. The president looked like he had aged 10 years. The Joint Chiefs sat around a table staring at papers they could not understand. Nobody knew what to do with a legal threat from space. The alien stood 7 feet tall and looked like a person made of silver metal. It called itself Arbitrator Veltar. It spoke in the same computer voice they had heard from the ships. Your species must select representatives to argue your case. The Cosmic Court requires advocates who understand legal reasoning and evidence presentation. We want our best lawyers, the president said. Whatever this trial is, we want our best legal minds on it. Veltar made a sound like static. Your meaning is unclear. What are lawyers? Lisa stepped forward. Legal representatives. People who argue cases in court, people who know the law and how to defend their clients. Ah, yes, legal processors. Each species has those. Most are quite predictable. The Zeridian legal processors used mathematical proofs. The Altarian legal processors used historical precedent algorithms. All failed to demonstrate adequate reasoning capacity. The Secretary of State leaned forward. What exactly do we need to prove? Civilizational merit. Your species must demonstrate superior organizational principles, efficient resource allocation, logical social structures, and advanced technological integration. The standards are clearly defined in the Cosmic Legal Code, Section 4892 through Section 7056. Lisa felt sick. And if we fail, your species becomes part of the collective. Your people will be relocated to appropriate work assignments based on individual capacity assessments. Your planet will be optimized for maximum productive output. It is actually quite beneficial for most species. They no longer need to worry about decision-making or resource management. The room went silent. Outside the window, one of the alien ships cast a shadow over the Washington Monument. The president looked at Lisa. "You're our attorney general. Can we fight this?" Lisa had spent 20 years as a prosecutor before taking the job. She had won cases that everyone said were impossible. She had put away criminals who seemed untouchable. But this was different. This was humanity itself on trial. "We need our best people," she said. "I want Jake Sullivan from Morrison & Associates. He's the toughest corporate lawyer in the country. I want Dr. Amanda Wright from Georgetown. She knows international law better than anyone. I want Professor Henry Liu from Harvard. He wrote the book on constitutional theory. And I want Carlos Rodriguez from the Public Defender's Office in Los Angeles. He's never lost a murder case." "Will they come?" the president asked. "They'll come. This is the biggest case in human history." Veltar watched this exchange with what might have been curiosity. "These legal processors of yours, do they operate using standard logical frameworks?" "What do you mean?" Lisa asked. "Do they follow predictable reasoning patterns? Do they arrive at conclusions through algorithmic analysis? Do they prioritize efficiency and order above all other considerations?" Lisa thought about Jake Sullivan screaming at opposing counsel in a boardroom. She thought about Carlos Rodriguez charming a jury while destroying a witness. She thought about Amanda Wright finding loopholes in treaties that nobody else even knew existed. She thought about Henry Liu writing legal theories that turned conventional wisdom upside down. "No," she said. "They don't follow predictable patterns at all." "Interesting. This may complicate the proceedings. Most species select their most logical legal processors. Logic is easily defeated by superior logic. But if your legal processors are not logical, they're logical, just not in ways you might expect." Veltar made the static sound again. "We shall see. You have 29 days to prepare. The trial will be conducted aboard our primary vessel. You may bring whatever materials you deem necessary for your defense. The court will provide translation services and basic life support." "What are the rules of the trial?" Lisa asked. "The cosmic court operates under the universal standards of legal reasoning. All arguments must be supported by evidence. All evidence must be logically sound. All conclusions must follow from established premises. The court does not recognize emotional appeals, cultural biases, or subjective interpretations." Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. The aliens wanted pure logic. No emotion, no cultural context, no subjective interpretation. They wanted the kind of legal reasoning that existed only in textbooks, not in real courtrooms where human lawyers fought with everything they had. "Understood," she said. But as Veltar left the room, Lisa was already thinking about everything. The alien had just told them not to use emotional appeals, cultural biases, subjective interpretations, all the messy human things that made their legal system work, all the things that drove other species crazy about dealing with humans, all the things that might save them. She picked up her phone and started making calls. Jake Sullivan answered on the first ring. "I heard about the aliens. When do we start?" "Tomorrow." "And Jake, this isn't like any case you've ever worked." "Good. I was getting bored anyway." Lisa smiled for the first time since the ships had arrived. Humanity was about to go on trial for its life, and they were sending in the lawyers. Jake Sullivan arrived in Washington the next morning carrying 3 cups of coffee and a briefcase that cost more than most people's cars. He looked like he was heading to a merger negotiation, not the trial of the human species. Carlos Rodriguez, got off the same plane wearing a rumpled suit and carrying a paper bag with breakfast in it. Amanda Wright flew in from Brussels, still wearing her diplomatic credentials from a trade summit. Henry Liu took the train from Boston because he hated flying and spent the trip reading legal philosophy books. Lisa gathered them in the most secure conference room in the Justice Department. The walls were lined with law books that suddenly seemed very small and local. Outside the window, alien ships cast shadows that never moved. "Tell me you have a plan," Jake said, opening his third coffee. "I have the beginning of a plan. First, we need to understand what we're fighting." Amanda spread files across the table. "I've been studying the documents they provided. The Cosmic Court has handled 412 cases, every single species lost. The Zephyrians have been expanding for over 500 years using this legal system." "What kind of arguments did the other species make?" Carlos asked. Henry Liu opened a tablet showing translated transcripts. "The Zeridians tried mathematical proofs. They argued that their civilization was superior because their resource allocation was 97% efficient. The court ruled that efficiency below 99% demonstrated inadequate optimization. The Altarians used historical precedent. They showed that their legal system had maintained order for 3,000 years. The court ruled that any system requiring 3,000 years to reach stability was inherently flawed." Jake shook his head. "They're setting impossible standards. What about appeals?" "There are no appeals. The Cosmic Court is final. Once they rule, enforcement is immediate." Amanda pulled up another file. "But I found something interesting. Look at the court composition. It's not just Zephyrians. There are representatives from dozens of species that were absorbed into the collective. They sit as observers, but they can ask questions." "Why is that important?" Lisa asked. "Because those species lost their cases. They know what it feels like to be where we are right now. Maybe we can reach them somehow." Carlos was reading through witness testimonies. "These other species all made the same mistake. They tried to prove they were better than the Zephyrians at being logical. They played the aliens' game by the aliens' rules. And they all lost," Henry said, "because the Zephyrians have been perfecting logical argumentation for centuries. Their whole civilization is built around it." Jake stood up and walked to the window. One of the alien ships was directly overhead, so big it blocked out the sun. "So we don't play their game, we play ours." "What do you mean?" Amanda asked. "Think about it. These aliens have conquered 400 worlds using pure logic, but they've never faced anything like a human courtroom. They've never dealt with jury nullification or precedent reversal or constitutional interpretation or any of the messy stuff that makes our legal system work." Lisa felt something click into place. "They're expecting us to argue like the other species, clean mathematical proofs and logical syllogisms. Instead, we give them chaos," Carlos said, starting to smile. "We give them the full human legal experience." Henry was already making notes. "The foundation of American jurisprudence isn't pure logic. It's the balance of competing interests. It's the idea that reasonable people can disagree and still both be right. Which is probably impossible for them to process," Amanda added. "Their whole system is based on finding the single correct answer to every question." Jake sat back down. "Okay. So what's our strategy?" Lisa looked around the table at the four lawyers who would either save humanity or watch it become enslaved. "We need to understand their weaknesses. Amanda, I want you to study every interaction they've had with our diplomats. Look for things that confused them or made them hesitate. Carlos, you know how to read people better than anyone. I want you to figure out how their psychology works. What makes them think the way they think? Henry, you understand legal theory better than anyone alive. I want you to find the philosophical holes in their system. Every legal framework has contradictions. Find theirs. Jake, you're our closer. When we get in that courtroom, you're going to have to think on your feet and adapt to whatever they throw at us. Start preparing for every possible scenario. What about you? Jake asked. I'm going to do what I do best. I'm going to build a case. Over the next week, they worked 18-hour days. Amanda discovered that the aliens had trouble understanding concepts like reasonable doubt and burden of proof. They seemed to think that either something was true or it wasn't, with no middle ground. Carlos spent hours watching recordings of Veltar and identified something crucial. The alien became agitated when presented with contradictory information that was simultaneously true. During one diplomatic meeting, when someone mentioned that American law allowed both federal and state courts to have jurisdiction over the same case, Veltar had made that static sound and asked 3 times for clarification. Henry found the philosophical weak point. The cosmic legal code claimed to be based on universal principles of logic and justice, but it was created by the Zephyrians for the Zephyrians. It reflected their cultural values and their way of thinking. It wasn't universal at all, just imposed universally. Jake discovered something even more important. The aliens had never encountered a legal system where the outcome could be influenced by factors other than pure logic. They had no concept of jury sympathy or judicial discretion or prosecutorial mercy. They had never dealt with lawyers who could make a judge cry or make a jury angry or make a witness admit to something they never intended to reveal. They're going to be completely unprepared for emotional argumentation, Jake said during one late-night session. Not because they don't have emotions, but because they've never seen emotions used as a legitimate part of legal reasoning. Is that ethical? Henry asked. Using their psychological blind spots against them? Amanda laughed. Henry, they're trying to enslave our entire species. I think we can use whatever advantages we have. Lisa stood at the window looking up at the alien ships. In 2 weeks, she would be aboard one of those vessels arguing for the future of humanity. The aliens expected logical, predictable legal arguments. They expected humans to try to prove they were worthy according to alien standards. Instead, they were going to get something completely different. They were going to get the full power of human legal thinking in all its chaotic, contradictory, emotionally driven glory. There's one more thing we need to consider, Carlos said. What if we lose? The room went quiet. Outside, traffic moved through the streets of Washington like everything was normal. But everyone knew that in a few weeks, those streets might be empty and those cars might be driven by human slaves working for alien masters. We're not going to lose, Lisa said, because we're going to give them something they've never seen before. We're going to show them that chaos isn't a weakness, it's a strength. Jake raised his coffee cup. To chaos. To chaos, the others echoed. And in the conference room overlooking the alien ships, 5 human lawyers began planning the most important case in the history of their species. The transport beam felt like being dissolved and rebuilt atom by atom. Lisa materialized on the deck of the Zephyrian flagship with her stomach still somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean. Jake appeared next to her looking green around the edges. Carlos muttered something in Spanish that was probably not appropriate for intergalactic diplomacy. Amanda and Henry managed to look dignified, which Lisa envied. The courtroom was enormous. The ceiling stretched up so high it disappeared into darkness. Rows of seats held representatives from dozens of alien species, all watching the humans with expressions that ranged from curiosity to pity. At the front of the room, Arbitrator Veltar sat behind a bench that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of black crystal. The Cosmic Court will now hear the case of the Zephyrian Collective versus the human species, Veltar announced. His voice echoed in the vast space. The defendant species has appeared as required. Legal. Processors have been selected. The proceedings will now commence. Veltar gestured to a section of the floor that rose up to form a podium. The collective will present its case for absorption of the defendant species. Another Zephyrian, identical to Veltar except for golden markings on its silver skin, took the podium. Honored arbitrator, distinguished observers, the case before us today is straightforward. The human species of the third planet fails to meet the minimum standards for civilizational independence as established by the Cosmic Legal Code. The prosecutor's presentation was like watching a computer analyze data. Charts appeared in the air showing human warfare statistics, environmental destruction rates, resource allocation inefficiencies, and social inequality measurements. Every fact was precise, every argument was logical, every conclusion followed inevitably from the evidence. Humans have engaged in over 15,000 documented conflicts in their recorded history. Their resource allocation efficiency averages 67%, far below the acceptable threshold. Their social organization displays chaotic variations across geographic regions with no unifying logical framework. Lisa watched the alien observers taking notes. Some looked convinced already. The case against humanity was mathematically airtight. Furthermore, the prosecutor continued, human legal systems demonstrate fundamental irrationality. They maintain contradictory laws across jurisdictions. They allow emotional factors to influence judicial decisions. They permit legal outcomes to vary based on subjective interpretations rather than objective facts. The prosecutor brought up specific examples. In the human legal case of Miller versus California, the defendant was simultaneously guilty and not guilty depending on community standards. In Brown versus Board of Education, the humans declared that legal precedent established over decades was suddenly invalid based on changing social views. These inconsistencies demonstrate that human legal reasoning is fundamentally flawed. When the prosecutor finished, Veltar made a note on a tablet that probably wasn't actually a tablet, but some kind of advanced alien technology. The defendant species may now present their case. Lisa stood up. Every eye in the courtroom focused on her. The weight of 8 billion human lives pressed down on her shoulders. She walked to the podium and looked out at an audience of alien beings who were about to decide whether her species deserved to exist. Honored arbitrator, distinguished observers, she began, the prosecutor has presented an accurate summary of human behavior patterns. We do fight wars. We do waste resources. We do have inconsistent legal systems across different regions. A murmur went through the alien observers. Jake had warned her this would happen. Most species tried to deny the charges or explain them away. Lisa was doing something unprecedented. In fact, we stipulate to most of the prosecutor's evidence, humans are inefficient by Zephyrian standards. Our legal systems are chaotic by cosmic court standards. Our social organization appears random by collective standards. Veltar leaned forward. You admit to these deficiencies. We admit to these differences. But the prosecutor has made a fundamental error in reasoning. He has assumed that efficiency Consistency and logical order are the only measures of civilizational merit. He has failed to consider that what appears chaotic might actually be adaptive. Lisa gestured, and Jake joined her at the podium. He looked like a predator who had spotted prey. My colleague will demonstrate the flaws in the prosecutor's reasoning. Jake smiled at the alien observers with the same expression he used when he was about to destroy an opposing lawyer. Let me ask the arbitrator a simple question. Has the Cosmic Court ever made an error in judgment? The Cosmic Court operates according to established logical principles. Errors are not possible within this framework. So you're saying the court is infallible? Correct. And the cosmic legal code that governs these proceedings, is it perfect? It represents the culmination of logical legal reasoning. It is as perfect as any system can be. Jake's smile got wider. Then why does it need enforcement? If the code is perfect and the court is infallible, why don't all species voluntarily join the collective? Veltar paused for the first time since the trial began. Species resist because they lack understanding of the code's perfection, or because they have different values and different ways of thinking. But let's set that aside for now. You've conquered 412 worlds using this perfect system. Can you tell me how many of those conquests involved species that were developing faster than light travel? That information is not relevant to the current proceedings. I think it is. Because if your perfect system is so superior, why haven't any of those absorbed species contributed to technological advancement within the collective? Why are you still using the same technology you had 500 years ago while humans went from horse-drawn carriages to space flight in less than a century? The alien observers were paying attention now. Lisa could see them looking at each other and making their own notes. Human technological development is irrelevant, Veltar said, but there was something different in his voice. Less certainty. Is it? Because our chaotic, inefficient, contradictory civilization produced quantum computers and genetic engineering and artificial intelligence in the span of a single human lifetime. Your perfect logical system has been stagnant for centuries. Carlos stepped up to join them. If I may, arbitrator, I'd like to cross-examine the prosecutor's claims about human legal systems. Proceed. Carlos looked at the Zephyrian prosecutor like he was a hostile witness. You stated that human legal systems are flawed because they produce different outcomes in similar cases. Is that correct? Yes. Logical consistency requires identical inputs to produce identical outputs. So in your system, every case with similar facts would have the same result, naturally. No matter what new information emerged, no matter how circumstances changed, no matter what the specific context was. Context is accounted for in the initial logical analysis. Carlos nodded slowly. So your system could never adapt to new situations. It could never learn from mistakes. It could never evolve beyond its original programming. Evolution implies imperfection in the original design. Which brings us back to my colleague's point. If your system is perfect, why has it never produced anything new? Why has it never grown beyond what it was 500 years ago? Lisa watched Veltar processing this line of reasoning. She could almost see his logical circuits trying to find a flaw in the argument and failing. The court will recess for deliberation, Veltar announced suddenly. As the aliens filed out, Lisa gathered her team around her. How do you think we're doing? Jake was grinning. Did you see their faces when Carlos asked about adaptation? They have no answer for that. We're not done yet, Amanda warned. They're going to come back with counter-arguments. They didn't conquer. 400 worlds by giving up after one round. Henry was studying the alien observers. Look at them. They're not just watching anymore. They're thinking. Some of them are starting to question whether the system that enslaved them was really as perfect as they were told. Carlos stretched his shoulders. Round 1 goes to us, but they're going to hit back hard in round 2. Lisa looked up at the massive courtroom around them. Somewhere far below, Earth was waiting to hear whether humanity would remain free or become slaves. Then we better be ready for round 2. When Veltar returned, his expression was harder than before. The court has considered the defendant's arguments. The proceedings will continue. The real fight was about to begin. When the trial resumed, Veltar's demeanor had changed. The calm certainty was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like frustration. The court has reviewed the defendant's arguments. While creative, they fail to address the fundamental issue. Chaos is not a virtue. Inefficiency is not strength. The defendant species must prove that their disorganized approach to civilization produces superior results to logical organization. Lisa stood up. We'd like to call our first witness. The Cosmic Court does not use witnesses. Evidence must be presented in logical format for analysis. Then we'd like to present evidence through direct examination of the court itself. Veltar paused. Explain. Amanda took the podium. Your Honor, we request permission to demonstrate the practical application of human legal reasoning by examining the court's own procedures. The court's procedures are not on trial. With respect, Your Honor, they are. The question before this court is whether human civilization has merit. But that question cannot be answered without examining the framework being used to judge us. If the framework itself is flawed, then any conclusions drawn from it are invalid. Jake whispered to Carlos. She's good. The cosmic legal code is the product of centuries of logical refinement, Veltar said. Then it should be able to withstand logical examination, Amanda replied, unless the court is afraid that its perfect system might have imperfections. The alien observers stirred. Lisa could see that Amanda had hit a nerve. Challenging the court's authority was apparently not something that happened often. Very well. The court will permit limited examination of its procedures. Amanda smiled. Thank you, Your Honor. Let's start with jurisdiction. On what authority does this court claim the right to judge human civilization? The Cosmic Legal Code grants the Zephyrian collective authority over all species within the designated expansion zone. And who wrote the Cosmic Legal Code? The Zephyrian collective. So the Zephyrians gave themselves authority over other species. Did those species consent to this authority? Consent is not required when authority is logically justified. But who determines what constitutes logical justification? The Cosmic Legal Code provides clear standards. Standards written by the same Zephyrians who benefit from them. In human legal systems, we call that a conflict of interest. Veltar made his static sound. Your meaning is unclear. Henry Liu stepped forward. In human jurisprudence, we recognize that no party can be a fair judge of their own actions. A prosecutor cannot also be the judge. A plaintiff cannot also be the jury. The appearance of bias undermines the legitimacy of any legal proceeding. The Zephyrian collective operates according to objective logical principles. But those principles were defined by the Zephyrians, Amanda continued. What if another species had different logical principles? What if they valued adaptation over efficiency, or diversity over uniformity? Would their principles be equally valid? Only one set of principles can be logically correct. Says who? Says Logic itself. Carlos jumped up. Objection, Your Honor. Veltar looked confused. Objection to what? The witness is assuming facts not in evidence. He's claiming that logic itself supports his position, but he hasn't provided any evidence for that claim. He's making a circular argument. I do not understand the term objection. Lisa felt a moment of pure joy. In human legal systems, when one side makes an argument that violates the rules of fair proceeding, the other side can object. The judge then rules on whether the argument is valid. But I am the judge? Exactly. You're ruling on your own arguments. In human courts, that would be grounds for mistrial. What is mistrial? Jake stepped up with a predatory grin. A mistrial is what happens when the legal proceedings become so contaminated by bias or procedural errors that a fair outcome is impossible. When that happens, the entire trial is thrown out and must be started over with a new judge. The alien observers were completely focused now. Some were making rapid notes. Others were having quiet conversations among themselves. The Cosmic Court does not recognize such procedures, Veltar said, but his voice had lost its authority. Which proves our point, Lisa said. Your system cannot handle situations it wasn't designed for. It cannot adapt to new circumstances. It cannot even consider the possibility that it might be wrong. Henry opened his tablet and began reading. In human legal philosophy, we have a concept called natural justice. It requires that legal proceedings be fair, that judges be impartial, and that all parties have an opportunity to present their case. Your system violates every one of these principles. Your Honor, Amanda said, we move for dismissal of all charges on the grounds that this court lacks proper jurisdiction and has demonstrated systematic bias against the defendant species. The court does not recognize motions for dismissal, which is exactly why the court is illegitimate, Carlos said. A legal system that cannot question itself is not a legal system at all. It's just tyranny dressed up in fancy language. Veltar stood up abruptly. The court will recess for extended deliberation. As the aliens filed out again, Lisa gathered her team. They had pushed hard and scored points, but she could see confusion and anger in the alien observers. Some looked convinced by the human arguments. Others looked hostile. Think we went too far? Jake asked. Maybe, but we needed to shake them up. Their whole system is based on the assumption that they're right and everyone else is wrong. We had to challenge that assumption. Amanda was watching. The observers. Look at them. They're not just confused anymore, they're angry. Some of them are realizing that they were conquered by a system that was never as fair or logical as they were told. Henry nodded. We've introduced reasonable doubt about the court's authority. But that might not be enough. We still need to prove that human civilization has positive value. That's phase 2, Lisa said. First, we had to show that their system is flawed. Now we have to show that our system is better. Carlos was looking worried. What if they just decide to skip the trial and conquer us anyway? What if we've pushed them too hard? Then we've already lost, Lisa said. Our only chance was to make them question everything they believe about law and justice and civilization. If we can't do that, then humanity was doomed from the start. Jake was pacing. The question is, what do they do now? Do they try to patch the holes in their system, or do they admit that the holes exist? They're logical, Amanda said. If we've proven that their system has flaws, they have to address those flaws somehow. Henry was making notes. Unless they decide that logic itself is less important than maintaining power. Tyrannies throughout history have faced this choice. When their legitimacy is challenged, they either reform or become more oppressive. Lisa looked around the vast alien courtroom. The technology here was centuries beyond anything on Earth. The Zephyrians could wipe out humanity without breaking a sweat. But they had chosen to use legal proceedings instead of military force. That had to mean something. They believe in their system, she said finally. They really think it's perfect, and perfect systems don't make exceptions or compromises. If we can prove that their perfect system is flawed, then either they have to fix it or admit it was never perfect in the first place. And if they admit it was never perfect, Carlos said, then they have to admit that all their previous conquests were illegitimate, which means they have to let those species go free, Amanda added. Jake stopped pacing. No wonder they're taking so long to deliberate. We haven't just challenged their authority over us. We've challenged their authority over everyone. Lisa felt the weight of history pressing down on her. In trying to save humanity, they might have accidentally started a revolution that would reshape the entire galaxy. The question was whether the Zephyrians would allow that revolution to happen, or whether they would abandon their legal pretenses and resort to force. When Veltar returned, his silver skin had taken on a darker tone. The court has reached a preliminary conclusion. The defendant species has raised procedural questions that require clarification. The court will address these questions before proceeding with the main trial. Lisa stood up. We're ready to proceed, Your Honor. But she could see in Veltar's expression that they were about to face their biggest challenge yet. The Zephyrians were adapting to human legal tactics. The question was whether humans could adapt fast enough to stay ahead of them. Veltar's voice echoed through the massive courtroom with a new edge of desperation. The court has reviewed the procedural challenges raised by the defendant species. While these challenges demonstrate creative reasoning, they do not alter the fundamental facts of the case. Lisa could see that something had changed during the recess. The alien observers were no longer sitting quietly. They were whispering among themselves, pointing at documents, making gestures that looked almost human. In their agitation, the court therefore rules that the cosmic legal code remains valid and that these proceedings will continue under established protocols, Veltar continued. The defendant species will now present their final arguments for civilizational merit. Lisa stood up slowly. This was it. Everything came down to the next few minutes. Your Honor, before we present our final arguments, we have one last procedural question. The court has ruled that procedural challenges are closed. This isn't a challenge, Your Honor. It's a request for clarification. We want to make sure we understand exactly what standard we're being judged by. Veltar hesitated. The standard is civilizational merit as defined in the Cosmic Legal Code. Jake stepped forward. But, Your Honor, the code defines merit as logical, organization, efficient resource allocation, and technological advancement. Is that correct? Yes. So any species that demonstrates superior logical organization would be considered to have greater civilizational merit. Obviously. And any legal system that produces more logical outcomes would be superior to one that produces less logical outcomes. Correct. Lisa felt her heart racing. Jake was setting up the trap they had planned during their preparation. Everything depended on whether the aliens would walk into it. Then we request that this court prove its own civilizational merit by demonstrating the logical superiority of its legal system. The courtroom went completely silent. Even the whispered conversations among the observers stopped. The court's merit is not on trial, Veltar said. But it is, Your Honor. You're asking us to prove that human civilization deserves to exist. But if your civilization is inferior to ours, then by your own standards, you should be absorbed into our system instead of the other way around. Amanda joined them at the podium. Your Honor, you've stated that only the most logically advanced civilization deserves independence. We propose a test. Let's see which legal system can solve a complex problem more effectively. What kind of test? Veltar asked. Henry Liu stepped forward, carrying a thick folder. A case study. We present both legal systems with the same set of facts and see which one reaches a better conclusion. Carlos grinned. Like a legal competition. Winner takes all. Veltar made his static sound. The cosmic court does not compete with primitive legal systems. Because you're afraid you'll lose, Jake said. The alien observers stirred. Lisa could see that Jake's challenge had hit home. In cultures built around concepts of superiority and logical perfection, backing down from a direct challenge was apparently unthinkable. Very well. Present your test case. Henry opened his folder. The case involves a trade dispute between three parties with conflicting claims to the same resource. Party A discovered the resource but lacks the technology to extract it. Party B has the technology but needs Party C's transportation network to move the resource to market. All three parties have legitimate claims under different legal frameworks. The solution is obvious, Veltar said. The party with the strongest legal claim receives the resource. Which party is that? Amanda asked. The one whose claim is most logically sound. But they all have logically sound claims under their own legal systems. Party A has discovery rights. Party B has technological superiority. Party C has geographical necessity. How do you choose between three equally valid logical arguments? Veltar paused. Lisa could almost see his processing systems trying to find a single logical answer to a problem designed to have multiple valid solutions. The court requires additional information to determine the strongest claim. What additional information? Carlos asked. The specific legal framework that applies to this situation. But that's the problem, Lisa said. There is no single legal framework. Each party operates under their own system. In your legal philosophy, only one system can be correct. So which one is it? The most logical system, which is determined how? By logical analysis. Performed by whom? By the appropriate legal authority. Jake smiled. Which in this case would be you. So you're saying that you should decide which legal system is correct and then apply that system to determine the outcome. Correct. But what if one of the other parties disagrees with your choice of legal framework? What if they argue that their system is more logical than yours? Then they would be incorrect. Says who? Says logic. Amanda leaned forward. Your Honor, you're making the same circular argument we identified earlier. You're saying your system is correct because your system says it's correct. That's not logic. That's just assertion. Henry opened his tablet again. Let me show you how human legal systems would handle this case. We wouldn't try to find the single correct answer. We would bring all three parties together and help them negotiate a solution that works for everyone. That is impossible. Only one party can possess the resource. Why? Carlos asked. Why can't they share it? Why can't Party A get discovery, compensation, Party B get extraction rights, and Party C get transportation fees? Everyone wins. Because that would not be logically pure. It would be a compromise. Exactly, Lisa said. And compromise is something your perfect logical system cannot handle. It can only see win-lose scenarios. It cannot conceive of win-win solutions. The alien observers were becoming more agitated. Several were standing up and pointing at the human legal team. Others were making rapid gestures at Veltar. "Your Honor," Amanda said, "we've just demonstrated that human legal reasoning is superior to cosmic court reasoning. We found a solution that satisfies all parties, while your system could not even identify a single answer. Compromise is not superiority, it is weakness." Jake stepped forward with the expression of a lawyer who smelled blood in the water. "Really? Then explain why the Zephyrian Collective has been technologically stagnant for 500 years, while humans went from primitive agriculture to space travel in the same time period. Explain why your perfect logical system has never produced anything new, while our chaotic compromise-based system has given birth to quantum mechanics and genetic engineering and artificial intelligence. Explain why species absorbed into your collective stop innovating and stop growing and stop contributing anything to galactic civilization." Veltar stood up abruptly. "The court rules that the defendant species lacks civilizational merit and will be absorbed into the collective immediately." "On what grounds?" Lisa demanded. "On the grounds that this court has the authority to make such determinations. Authority granted by whom? By the Cosmic Legal Code, which was written by whom? By the Zephyrian Collective, which gives you authority over whom? Over all species in the expansion zone. As determined by whom?" Veltar made the static sound again, louder this time. "By the Zephyrian Collective." Carlos laughed. "Your Honor, you've just admitted that your entire legal system is based on nothing more than the assertion that you have the right to make the rules. That's not law. That's not logic. That's just tyranny." The alien observers erupted. Several species were on their feet arguing with each other. Others were pointing accusingly at Veltar. The neat, orderly courtroom dissolved into chaos. "Order!" Veltar shouted. "The court demands order." "Why?" Amanda called out over the noise. "Your system just proved it has no legitimate authority. Why should anyone follow your orders?" One of the alien observers, a tall being with blue skin and 4 arms, stepped forward. "The human legal processors raise valid questions. If the Cosmic Court's authority is self-created, then our species were conquered illegally." Another observer joined him. "Our worlds were taken by a system that cannot justify its own existence. The absorption of our species was based on false premises." Veltar's skin was flickering between silver and black. "The court maintains absolute authority. These proceedings are terminated." Lisa stepped forward one last time. "Your Honor, you can terminate the proceedings, but you cannot terminate the questions we've raised. Every species in this room now knows that your perfect system is built on a foundation of circular logic and arbitrary authority. You can conquer us by force, but you cannot conquer us legally. And every species you've absorbed in the past will know that their conquest was illegitimate." Jake spread his arms wide, addressing the entire courtroom. "The choice is yours. You can maintain your system through force and admit that it was never about logic or justice. Or you can acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, there are better ways to organize galactic civilization." The courtroom fell silent. Veltar stood motionless for long minutes while the alien observers waited. Finally, his skin shifted to a deep, gray color. "The court recognizes that procedural irregularities have compromised these proceedings. The case against the human species is dismissed, pending a complete review of Cosmic Legal Code authority and jurisdiction." The alien observers erupted again, but this time in celebration rather than confusion. Lisa felt her knees almost give out from relief.